Welcome to the Gather Round series and Nurturing the Rural Ecosystem. I'm Christy Dickinson, Senior Program Director at Arts Midwest. I use the pronouns she and her. I have brown wavy hair and round glasses on today, and I'm wearing a brown shirt with colorful earrings and artwork in my background. Today, I come to you from the homeland of the Dakota people, Minnesota, Clearwater, also known as Minnesota, and near the Bdote, the place where the Mississippi and the Minnesota rivers meet and central to the Dakota creation stories. We are glad to have you join the second of 3 explorations as part of the Gather Round series, a capacity building project of the United States Regional Arts Resilience Fund that is made possible by the Mellon Foundation and an anonymous donor. The core values we'll hold in our space today include breath. We are working at a different pace. Deep listening. Our work is based in openness and empathy and curiosity. Today, we are so excited to have these great colleagues joining us from across our Midwest region. And especially welcome to Benya Kraus, the co-founder of Lead for America and Minnesota Executive Director. She is passionate about the people going back to their hometowns and the development of rural entrepreneurial ecosystems. We are excited to have her lead today's conversations with leaders who understand the role of arts and creativity and what role it plays in the ecosystem for economic impact, connectivity, history, and everyday life in the rural environment. Welcome, Benya and contributors. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Christy, and thanks to this whole Arts Midwest community for hosting this conversation. As Christy mentioned, I'm Benya Kraus. I'm one of the co-founders of Lead for America. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling to you from Waseca, Minnesota. It's a rural community, about 10,000 people in southern Minnesota. It's the hometown of where my family has spent the past now 6 generations as farm stewards on farmland here. It is also on Dakota land of the Shetty-Sakoe people. And you might also know us about 30 minutes west to us is Mankato, which is also the site in which in 1862 with the Dakota Uprising, 38 Dakota people were hung. And so I sit on this land and come into this space of knowing that our histories, our places are complicated, that we hold trauma, hope, hardship, and also possibility and reconciliation and thinking of how we walk together. So I want to begin with where I come from because we're going to have a lot of different communities and lands that we are sharing in this virtual space here today. For folks listening in, just as a visual description of where I am calling from, I've got some pink lipstick on, brown hair, long, some golden hoops, which is my favorite accessory, and again, calling you from Waseca. I am entering into this conversation as I don't know if I would necessarily call myself an artist in terms of being gifted in that way, but I have seen through the work that I do with Lead for America the important role of arts as a way of awakening what is possible in a community about allowing us to think about our histories in ways that can make space for the reconciliation that is necessary for us to dream up a new hope. And so I come into this conversation as a big champion for the arts with questions for how do we sustain the role of arts in our communities, especially in rural places where the need to be thinking of our communities from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, which is often the way national headlines will describe us. I come from that lens of how can artists shepherd that way of living and working and building together. So to that end, I'm so excited to be part of this conversation with our group here and our amazing panelists. So I'll go around and just call on our different panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into this conversation around sustainability. How do we sustain ourselves, our communities, our finances, public support, and as a way of also sustaining our communities and the role of arts in them. So with that, I'll kind of go around my screen here. John, would you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you very much, Benya. It's a real honor for me to be here, and I really want to pass out a good word, a positive word of thanks to the Arts Midwest today for sponsoring this and making our organization a part of this particular great day. My name is John Breuninger. I'm an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. Land basing first, our tribe originated in the Iroquois Confederacy of New York. In fact, the entire state of New York was composed of 5 major tribes. Our people moved here with the Indian Removal Act in 1821 and 22, and we moved about 650 people here to Wisconsin. We occupied land with the Ho-Chumps and the Menominees. We bought into that. It's a big joke around the Menominee and Oneida because we're so close that they let us come live with them. Unfortunately, we had to pay a price to do that. So we've done that. But I come from the beautiful fertile lands of our reservation, 65,000 acres. We sit directly along the path of the Fox River, which is one of 5 rivers in the world that runs in the northern direction. I guess it's 4. You don't see many rivers running in the northern direction, but that's a waterway that brings food and supplies and things into our area. The second thing, other than our people and the importance of our Oneida people here, is we are a home of the Green Bay Packers. And of course, that's in direct competition to our Michigan friends, our Minnesota friends, our Illinois friends, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, everybody needs fans, so we do take our Packers quite seriously. And it's a lifetime. It's not about the season. It's about a way of life. So everything we do is there. I represent the Woodland Indian Art, Inc. We are a 501c tax exempt organization. We're incorporated in the state of Wisconsin, and we're managed by a 13-member all-native board of directors. Our biggest claim to fame is our annual Woodland Indian Art Show and Market, and I'll be discussing some of those particular pieces later on in our presentations.
Great, thank you, John. Yeah, well, awesome, thank you. We'll just go around with introductions here, and but excited to dive back into that, John. Next up, Stacy, if you want to introduce yourself, and also why do you care about your work, and how are you getting others in your community to do that too?
Absolutely. I'm Stacy Braun. I'm the executive director for the Aberdeen Area Arts Council in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And we're located in the northeast corner of the state. I use the pronouns of she and her. Today I'm wearing a top that's an abstract pattern in shades of blue. I have glasses, dark hair, and I'm happily embracing the natural silver highlights that are appearing in the recent years. I'm sitting in my office with windows behind me. And I acknowledge that the South Dakota is the ancestral territory of the Santee, Yankton, and Teton Lakota, which is an alliance known as the Oshiti-Shikakui.
Great, thank you, Stacy. Aileen.
Thank you, Benya, and thank you, Arts Midwest, for having us here. My name is Aileen Pagan Rohwer, and my pronouns are she, her. I come to you from the land of the Anishinaabe people in Michigan. Our organization, Riverfolk Music and Arts, which has been around since 2004, is located in Manchester, Michigan, and we are in the southwest corner of Washtenaw County, which, if you're familiar with Michigan geography, that's land of U of M Go Blue. So just had to throw that in. We are here happy to serve our community through music and arts in trying to engage the community in these activities to help promote cultural diversity. That is our main focus in our community.
Great. And Kayla.
Hi there, I'm Kayla Boye. I am the executive director of the Youngstown Playhouse. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am wearing glasses and a light colored blazer, and I am sitting in front of a blue background. The Youngstown Playhouse is located in Youngstown, Ohio. It is on the lands of the Kaskaskia, Osage, and Erie peoples. We are located in Youngstown, Ohio, which is about halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. And we are one of America's longest running community theaters. We will be celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2024. And thanks in large part to Arts Midwest, we are looking forward to approaching that milestone in a sustainable, strong place. So thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kayla. And Jessie, introduction from you.
Greetings from Western North Dakota, right on the edge of the Badlands in the North Unit of the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I'm Jessie Veeder Scofield, and I'm coming to you today from our Pioneer Museum, actually, and I'm wearing a hot pink blazer and hoop earrings. I look tired because I have two little kids. One's graduating from preschool today. I'm sitting in front of a bookshelf full of history, of course. So I'm the director of the Long X Arts Foundation, which is a new organization dedicated to creating arts experiences for our community on the edge of the Badlands here in oil and ag country. So we've experienced a huge boom in the last 10 years, most of it happening in 2 years, in 2010, from 1,200 people in Watford City to 10,000 people currently. So our town has grown with a mission of creating arts and culture, with creating and actually supporting an organization that helps create quality of life experiences and helps bring people together. So that's our big mission here. We also are on the right on the edge of the reservation, Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. So we support them through tourism and history and telling their story as well. So I'm a fourth generation on our family's ranch, and rancher, and raising my kids on a cattle ranch out here. So I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessie. And I think a really great way to actually dive into, our first kind of question here. So the conversation today, right, is rooted on this idea of sustainability. And so over the course of this conversation in the next hour and a half, we'll be talking about how do we sustain community care? How do we sustain revenue and finances? How do we sustain public support? And then finally, how do we sustain you? So we'll be going through those themes. And I think, Jessie, could you kick us off a little bit of, you mentioned just this huge population growth, the also proximity to very different sorts of communities. When you think about sustaining community care, what does it look like to you, or how has your organization really increased visibility of what your organization does when there seems to be so much influx?
That's a great question, because we're so new, and I say new because you have people here who've been working for an organization that's 100 years old. But we didn't have an arts organization when I was growing up here. We didn't have a way to support artists and musicians and create art experiences necessarily. Our big art experience was perhaps hiring me to sing on a flatbed trailer and at a picnic. And we did have like arts and crafts in the park and things, but that was beyond that. There wasn't really a core group that really worked on artists being able to be here, basically. And I guess when I came back home 10 years ago, everything was changing just right before our eyes. And our strategic planning committee and our community leaders really saw arts and culture and cultivating that as a way to bring people together and allow people the chance, I guess, or not the opportunity, because the opportunity was there with the jobs, but the reason to stay and bring their families. That was the big thing that we were dealing with. Infrastructure, all of that to get them into houses, all of the logistics of what it takes in the city and the county to go from 1,200 people to 10,000 people. But then they were coming in for jobs, but what were we going to do to make them stay? And I really believe it's programs and events and offering them these experiences to get together and feel like they're part of a community. Because if you are a local person here, you are an anomaly, you are a minority. And we were wanting to embrace that instead of looking at the headlines and saying, you know, this is a negative thing. How do we bring them together, make them feel at home? So your question was, how do we do that? And how did I become visible? Well, I was just certainly passionate about it. So I helped to create the board and helped create the 501c3. And then because I'm a musician myself and independently employed, I have my own business. I said, why don't you hire me as your executive director since we built this program? And then I just wound up bringing different arts activities, bringing artists and musicians into the events that were already created in our community, like our Home Fest celebration, like our Rib Fest celebration, and our Heritage Days and our museum, and into the school, and all of the things that you could think of to kind of show people like this is what they wanted. So I can really speak to building a program that way with not a lot of money. We also were able to have a centennial celebration where we sort of tested it out and really made part of that celebration art and music and bringing these people and their stories in. So to answer your question about visibility, I've just been, we as a organization, but for a long time it was just me. Now I have 2 or 3 employees, but would just be there and be like, hey, kids want to, you know, do art activities. And we continue to do that throughout our time here and growing. But we're, you know, doing all the things that everyone else is doing. We're on social media. We're posting all of the things that, you know, that our classes are creating so that people see that this is a fun environment, a safe environment for people to get involved in. And then we also work really closely, and this is important, and I think all of us on this call will agree because we're in such small communities, we have to collaborate with every organization that we possibly can to just help each other and get the word out. So we work with the Chamber of Commerce, the Pioneer Museum, the Rough Rider Center, which is our big event center, our city, our county, and they help fund our program too. So we're funded through JDA and the county. They fund my position and they see arts as tourism and economic development because the people that are on those boards are like-minded. So we can go to them and say, hey, will you throw some money in for us to get an assistant for me to be in this position? So we don't have to fundraise for my position, which is really great. But that visibility just means being there. So
Totally. What really stands out to me in what you're saying is you said something we just kept showing what it can do to people. And I think there's some piece of, you know, if we're always kind of waiting and asking for what it is that, you know, people want, I feel like there must be a sort of balance of a nimbleness of being able to listen, but also sometimes this daringness to say, I'm just going to try it and see what the reaction is. You use the word test a few times too, of when you were talking about the centennial. We just tested. We just tried to see what would happen. And I think too, an area that I really appreciate too, then how it aligns with my work. You know, we support young homecomers, currently about 106 fellows, what we say, young people returning to their hometowns to reinvest in those places. 106 across 26 states. And I think such a big piece of the homecoming, of feeling like you have purpose or something to come back to, is, you know, not just are there jobs, but also what is the culture of the place that I'm moving to. So I want to put a pin on that. One of your thoughts there of how you've worked with the county and kind of this regional tourism and economic development piece of how you made the case for arts there. So I want to lift that up as a really key point and come back to that. Just on now this note on visibility and community care, John, I want to ask you, because I think your organization, you know, your organization existed for quite some time, a little different from Jessie of kind of, you know, doing pop-ups and then turning into an organization. your organization's been around for a while, and I understand also has, a standing store that you sell artists goods with as well. So what does visibility then for you look like in terms of getting people to continue to come back to something that is in many ways entrenched or rooted in your community?
Thank you for that question. I think it's very important that our board has been around for 15 years, or the program has been around for 15 years. And we continue where in the last 5 years, our board has grown from 5 members to 13. And we have to keep changing our bylaws to do that, because we do have new people coming back home. Indians relocated in the 50s and their families were moved to the cities of Chicago and Detroit and Minneapolis and Milwaukee. But a lot of our people are returning to the reservation now. And as they come, many of them bring skills and capabilities into arts and culture, but they also want to learn it. They want to be retaught. So we try to make certain that inclusion is there. We recognize those that have been doing the art and culture work for many years, but we also encourage all of our newcomers or newbies, people coming back to our communities, to engage and take the classes that we offer. So we are offering a class once a month now in different art venues to entice the people to come back and get engaged with some of the culture and art. It was the pandemic that caused us to move from just our Woodland Indian Arts Show and Market, an annual event, to actually going online with sales. The biggest thing we've done, though, and we've been able to accomplish, is partnerships. I heard my former speaker here talk about the partnerships they arranged within their communities. We have been doing that also, and the partnerships pay benefits because that gets the word out and we're able to market that. So the partnerships we formed, the biggest one right now is with the Oneida Airport Hotel Corporation. We've leased space from them. So our show and market actually has just changed to that venue and increased. But we've also, since we've opened that particular thing, we have 2 other entities within the tribal community, our golf course and our casino, that are interested in having us opening the same type of display cases and selling artwork in their locations. So that's helped, and we're wearing our board out. That's why we keep increasing the board members, because we need more help. And these are not paying jobs. These are things that people want to do. So we engage volunteerism. We really, really rely upon volunteers to assist us with getting our displays out and things. But our website shows our sales, and it's all listed there by product and by artist, and people can use it. Yeah, and all the latest technology of PayPal, et cetera, in order to pay for things. So getting the message out there, social media, our newsletter, our website, all of that really has brought people into what we want to be doing.
Yeah, thanks, John. You hit a point there on engaging volunteers on this theme of sustaining community care. That's probably, is a very fundamental piece of, how do you sustain community care, which also means sustaining volunteerism. Kayla, I'm interested to hear from you. I know your organization existed, I think you said, for 100 years, right? And you, as a homecomer and kind of taking this next generation too, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about what does it mean to sustain community care within an organization that is 100 years old of sustaining itself. What is the role of volunteers needed there, and how have you found a way to sustain or grow your volunteerism base?
Thank you, Benya. Absolutely. The Youngstown Playhouse, as a community theater, was started by volunteers, and it has maintained volunteerism at the heart and core of its mission. It was started as an arts organization for the community, by the community, and it can't exist without the community. So we rely on 300 different local artists who donate their time and talents to perform and produce the shows, as well as an additional 80 volunteers who help out with ticketing and front of house activities, and everyone is invested. And that comes from a shared love of giving theater to our community, a love of performing that never goes away, and just a shared love of what it means to be an audience member and to feel that connection with the art on stage. So of importance to me is programming things that people care about and that they connect with, so they want to participate, and if so compelled, volunteer. But also, as we go forward, especially as we move out of the pandemic, how do we express appreciation for those things beyond, yay, we did a show, congratulations. Offering cast and crew dinners between shows. Recently, we've had to, sometimes the shows sell out. You might add an additional performance. So there's 2 performances back to back. A nice way to express that gratitude would be to provide the cast and crew a meal between shows. Starting an annual volunteer appreciation brunch or picnic or something of that sort, specifically as a thank you for giving us of your time and talents. So I would like to really, as we move forward, really invest in a comprehensive, continually expressing gratitude, because it's just nice to know that what you've done has made a difference or touched someone's life. Case in point, just to give a quick example, we just recently lost our longest serving volunteer. His name was Joseph Scarvell, and he did 500 shows or thereabouts in his 89 years as a director, actor, board member, teacher. His life story was someone that just kept giving selflessly. So to honor his memory, we established an endowment in his name to help support the Youth Theater Fund, to help continue his legacy and invest in the future artists and educators. So something like that goes a long way in showing his family and our community that his legacy made a huge impact on us.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that piece of celebrating your people is so crucial, I think in small town work, I'd love to hear if this is just me editorializing here, but, I think so for so many communities, we used to have, monuments or statues that were celebrating the people who contributed to our places. And it seems like in some, ways that as we've kind of, grown all together as a country, more hyper focused on national media sometimes, is that the people that we see as celebrities are people outside of our places, and that the people who step up for 500 shows every year are not seen as the level of celebrity that we might give to people that we have hot takes on TV, but really the ones that are most showing up every day really are the most local celebrities. I'm curious, in that trend. So that was my editorializing of, I wonder how much of it are we seeing as celebrating volunteers? Is that increasing or decreasing? I wonder if just as a quick poll on this group, with the pandemic and kind of, I think sometimes a hyper sensationalizing of the national, media, who here would say, I feel very strongly that volunteerism is increasing in my community and that we're on a really positive upward trajectory? Anyone? Okay, 3. And then who would say, no, we're kind of stagnating? Yeah. Would anyone say, I'm really worried about the state of volunteerism in my community? I'm going to point to you, Aileen, because I know you raised your hand on the stagnation piece. What makes you what keeps you up at night on kind of the sustaining of volunteers in your community and in your work?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And I one of the panelists had mentioned finding programming that people care about. And I think that's a really key point for all of us in these smaller towns to keep in mind, because we can have, personal aspirations of what we want to accomplish in our organizations. But if you don't have programming that the people in your community care about and want to be involved in, that makes it difficult to not only get volunteers, but to also get people to attend your events. And then the reasoning behind those events. For our organization, we really had to determine based on our current demographics, which is really over 95, 96% white Caucasian demographic in a small rural town, where, the founders of this organization had realized that diversity in this town is definitely an issue. And so from the beginnings, their programming included making sure that the people in this town had access to cultural events that would explore those different cultures and bring diversity that maybe the people in this town couldn't get to because of financial reasons or demographics or physical location. And so they brought those diverse programming options into this town. And since then, we've been able to build upon that by making sure that there's music, live music year round, that there's an educational portion of our programming. We started a youth strings program because the community did not have a youth music education program that exposed kids to string instruments. And then the latest program that we brought in is exploring our history through a program we call Passport to Manchester. And that is collaborating, another topic that one of the other panelists brought up, collaborating with our historical society to highlight the historical sites in our town and farmlands and explore the history beyond what people know about the English and German settlers coming into our town. And going back, way back to, well, who were the Native Americans that were here before anybody else was? What did they contribute? What did they do? And then exploring, the Underground Railroad history and exploring the Mexican immigrants' history that come into our town and tying all of those to music and arts events, which would then help us even further to stimulate economic activity in our town. So maybe I answered the question a little bit went off on a tangent, but going back to volunteerism and why it's stagnating, we have to look at, what are our programs? Are we offering programs that are of interest to people? And will that inspire them to be involved based on what you're offering?
Mm-hmm. And I hear in your response that there's, again, a little bit of a daring piece of, there, in some ways, like the work that you're doing is about getting people to care. So it's not so much even designing programming that, you are getting of, I really want to see this. There seems like a balance, right? You talk about the strings, sounds like probably that emerge as a need and then you respond to it. But then there might be, a more abstract need of we need more, diverse representation or exposure, but maybe it's a timeline of when people say, yeah, actually that is something that we need, as opposed to being able to drawing in Jessie's piece of testing different things and in some ways like showing a community what like intrinsically we all need. Stacy, I want to hear from you too on this, sustaining visibility here. And ways that, maybe going off of Aileen of being able to contextualize what it is that your community needs and how to offer something that like shows the case for why your organization can respond to it.
Sure. As far as keeping our visibility, it was hard this year with the pandemic because we do a lot of presenting. So our Arts in the Park last summer had to be canceled. And, any of our concerts and things were canceled. So it was hard for keeping our visibility. So we actually switched and we did some focusing on public art. And so we commissioned a husband and wife local artist, and they did a mural on the side of a building that is right along one of the main highways through our community. And that it was done in September. And so it was, as people were looking ahead to the possible long winter again, of knowing that, people were still going to be in isolation and things. And so it was really a bright spot for our community and the people. And we got a lot of positive feedback with that. And I think it really helped to elevate the Arts Council's visibility a little bit. And then, as far as talking volunteers and, a little bit into revenue sources too, one of the things that I've spent time doing this winter was just randomly, calling 5 people who have either been volunteers or are donated to the Arts Council, and just, even if it was just leaving a message saying, hey, we're looking forward to it. We're going to be back doing our business again. And just wanted to say that we miss seeing you and, hope everything was going okay. And it was just a way to connect. And for me, maybe it was more for my part, because I hadn't been seeing people and things. But that was another thing that we had done to just kind of stay connected to our community a little bit. So those are a couple of things we've been doing.
Wow. And how, because I think to be able to do that level of follow-up and cultivate, we're getting into this piece now of sustaining revenue. How much of your revenue then comes from these individual donors?
It's about 20%, I believe, is from that. That's our donations. And so it has been good. And so we'll see our donations were actually up this year. Our memberships were up when we did our drive last fall. And so hopefully, we'll see that again when we do it again this fall. Yeah.
And I think this piece on individual donors is a really crucial one, because I'm sure there's a method to your madness. Do you have a sort of like data tracking system that you're using pretty diligently? Do you have like a method on how many times is it appropriate to be asking or calling someone up before it gets too much? So if anyone here on this call or people listening in are like, I really want to amp up my individual donors, do you have a few tactics that you use that have worked well?
They all get a letter from us asking for that one, the donation, and we've been very successful with that. And then quite often a second reminder to them. And then as far as what I was doing this winter, it was totally random. It didn't have anything to do with how much they gave or anything. I just would pick through the list and just pick out 5 people or 6 people that week and call them. And I never asked for money on that phone call. I've been to some, fundraising sessions, and they say that, I think you should have 5 contacts with every one of your donors each year. And so I was kind of using that as my guideline. And a lot of them, like I said, are not asking for money. It's just making a connection with them. And as far as the system, we just keep tracking an Excel data sheet.
Oh, yeah. What about other folks? Kind of, maybe if you want to raise your hand, of how are you, are people tracking on Excel or tracking? Yeah, we got a few hands. Anyone using something else to track your volunteers? Yeah, Kayla, I'd be really curious to hear, because it sounds like you have truly such a vast network of volunteers. How much of individual donors currently is making up your revenue stream, or are they kind of more on the programmatic side?
It's a combination of sorts, Benya. I just recently joined the organization in this capacity, and one of my immediate goals, we never had a database until this past year. So coming in blind and not knowing the true scope of giving, we have a box office ticketing system in which some gifts had been tracked, but in terms especially also of sponsorships and institutional giving, there was no, centralized database. So we just onboarded Little Green Light, which is a fairly simple CRM, customer relationship management software. And our new ticketing system also has a milder version of those capabilities. We're now using Arts People, because our last box office supplier has ceased. Vendini, a lot of smaller theaters are going through this transition and trying to make sure the data has made the jump, right? So as we launched our annual giving campaign, a lot of it was trying to kind of piecemeal as people were responding from our mailing list, entering those gifts into our system and making reports and parameters to be able to compile giving histories and visitation histories of when they have come to see shows, special events, what kinds of shows they like, what are their preferences, because those become points of contact too, in addition to us, like Stacy, doing the annual hard letter mailing. We have been doing now our season subscription campaign, which also lets people, if they want to add on a gift on top of their subscription purchase, they're welcome to do so at that point in time, and staggering those campaigns just enough apart so they're not being inundated and fatigued, as it were. And I think with arts organizations this past year, that donor fatigue is real, right? We were the first to close and we're going to be the last to come back. So it's been this constant ask, really, because we haven't had the chance to really sell single tickets and do live shows. So we have been primarily dependent on contributed revenue, which is a wild shift from our previous manner of operations. The split used to be 70% of our income was ticket sales and 30% was donations. This year it's 99% is donations, right? So trying to grapple with that has been wild, but I'm hoping, again, as we emerge out of this, we'll have a stronger relationship with those donors, because they have, thank goodness, really shown up, and we couldn't be here without them.
Thank you. And John, I know you had a note too on volunteerism. I want to go back to what you were saying, that you increased your board from 5 people to 13 people, I think you said. So it seems like you're seeing an uptick in volunteerism. I'm curious, like, what's the reason for that for you? But also, as it ties into sustaining revenues, are you then using your volunteers to do programming that allows from event sales, that becomes your major revenue, or are you tapping into your volunteers as also an individual donor base?
In response to that, my comment is really relative to the inclusion of youth in our overall programming. One of our core values is to continue to keep the arts and culture moving by encouraging the youth to be engaged. Our local tribal high school actually has a requirement for graduation now that each student must participate in volunteerism within the community, and we're a very, very good venue for that to occur in. So we do get multiple students applying to come to volunteer, which also meets the needs of the volunteerism, but it also encourages them to get engaged in art, which also encourages them to join our guild, which we've just started. We used to have free membership and an open membership. Now we have a membership guild where each individual sponsor, donor, et cetera, can come in at whatever level they would like to with a monetary amount. And we do that on an annual basis. We're implementing that this coming September. So then we'll start that. But our youth are very excited about coming and volunteering their time. And once they get engaged, they want to come back. So we have had multiple years of service from many of our youth who have grown into becoming artists, and actually have been participating and are moving up into the competition in the arts arena. So we continue to foster the youth and continue to encourage them to come in and be with us. Our original membership was volunteerism. We've come to the part where the sustainability part is we needed another revenue generator to help us. The one thing about the volunteers and the revenue generation is that we make calls in person by board members. Again, you can have 5 board members hitting 50 homes apiece or 50 different places. Pretty soon, if you have 13 doing that, you're going to even expand further. We're a very family-oriented tribe. Our family expand within the family role. People will listen to each other, and so by including more people on the board and more volunteers doing the work, we're increasing our membership and therefore our revenues also. Right now, our revenues from volunteerism is probably around the 20 percentile. Most of ours is through donations and or sponsorship of certain components of our annual show and market. But we feel that with the guild going on, we're going to be able to increase our membership and continue to grow outside of our own tribal community.
And when you say sponsorship, are you alluding to, you know, that golf course and casino? Like, do you have then local businesses also, you know,
Yes,
sponsoring your event?
absolutely. And but the other thing is that's really important when you get sponsorship is that you give them the recognition that was mentioned earlier and thank them. As an example, the golf tournaments. Once the golf tournament is over and people have sponsored a component of that, a picture of the hole that they sponsored is taken of the winners of that hole with a thank you letter, and it's personally handed to the organizational management. It doesn't just go in the mail and they're getting a letter from so-and-so saying, here, thank you for sponsoring this. And then we encourage all of our participants to thank the courses and thank the vendors and the donors for that. So we got a lot of personal thank yous going out to organizations. We're finding our local community outside of the reservation community are beginning to donate more to us. We have certain businesses that have been very, very good about doing that.
Yeah, great. Aileen, I would love to hear from you about how ways that you have had to figure out, you know, diversifying your revenue stream.
Sure, thank you. So when the pandemic hit, we were all at this sort of crossroad of how are we going to continue our programming and reach the people that we want to reach without having a venue or a place to gather. So we started just brainstorming, and certainly the resources that we received online from all the major arts organizations, including Arts Midwest, teaching us the tools of how to continue engaging. And for us, that meant moving online and doing some of our programming via live stream. But it also, you know, went a little step further. You know, you can live stream to a specific platform, but you can also you can do multi-broadcast onto other platforms. So we not only used the Crowdcast platform, but we also multi-streamed onto Facebook, and you can collect donations on Facebook as well. You can keep your broadcast up for a number of days afterwards. You can continue sending your emails and getting people to tune in at their time and place, rather than, you know, just being open to expanding when you offer your programming, not just having it be on one day and one time. So that opened up a bunch of doors. But the other thing that really opened up a bunch of doors was, again, going back to the collaborating piece, you know, realizing that the other nonprofits in our town were also struggling. How could we, as an arts organization, elevate those other nonprofits in our town that were also struggling for attention and struggling for communicating with their constituents? So we started including a little video commercial of each of the nonprofits in our town that would broadcast in the middle of our live stream. And every time we had a program, there was a different nonprofit that was picked, and they had to make a couple minute video that we could help them with, because we had the tools to help them with and the technology. And it was inserted in the middle of the broadcast. And, you know, information was included about how to contact that nonprofit and what they do. So we found that helped to elevate both our organization and that other nonprofit, and bring in people that we didn't know, new relationships, new revenue sources, new ways to connect with more people in our town.
Wow, that's great. I love that. So then would nonprofits then pay to have a slot on your broadcast, or it was just something you were sharing? Wow.
It was totally free to them. We wanted to elevate their presence in our community. And by just collaborating and offering, you know, we were able to get this amazing grant from the U.S. Resiliency Grant. How are we going to reach the people we want to reach? So, you know, it was, come on over and be a part of what we're doing, because we have the resources to help everybody right now.
Wow. Wow. Yes, that's I think a really beautiful form of collaboration, and I think is a good segue back to you, Jessie. I mentioned that we're going to put the pin in the cushion there of how you have thought about this collaborative way of injecting arts into these larger tourism and economic development plans. I know a lot of people probably on this call right now will probably heard your session or your part before and said, what, she's paid and she's got staff with her? Oh my gosh, what is the magic wand here? So as you think about sustaining revenue, how do you support these operational costs where it is sometimes very hard for people to see that in order to run any of these events, you also need people that are working full time behind the scenes. So how have you made that case and sought and found the funding to sustain that?
It's funny because I was just at our JDA meeting, Job Development Authority through the county, 2 days ago to talk about budgeting. And I wish I had a magic wand to tell you how it all worked out, except for that I just am so integrated into this community and had some really good connections. And the way that I entered back in was through a contract position with economic development, because in this little town, they needed so much help because, again, boomed beyond anyone's dreams. So I was able to kind of get in and understand and be in on the strategic planning, and really, talk that through and convince that committee, of course, that we saw arts and cultural opportunities as something of value for the community. So fast forward, this 10 years later that I've been kind of working on it, I have become sort of have just continued to have that conversation with the Job Development Authority, and also continued to be doing the work of, like I said, putting the arts and cultural opportunities out there. So when we first started, like I said, just being at all of these things, and then having the community realize that this is something that they need, but we are just in such a unique position because that's what everyone is saying. We need people here to stay. We need people here to stay. We need people here to stay. We need businesses to stay. We need families to come in. And so how do we do that? And then I say, hey, here I am. I'm working in tourism. I was at the time in economic development. And here's what I'm seeing from our state. And I think some other states are saying it too, especially now with our governor. He put in a Main Street initiative plan and a call to action from all of the communities to think about our Main Street, think about infusing arts and culture into the plan, think about walkable communities, think about events downtown. Well, he is now, especially their administration is saying this, and we're over here like, we're already doing it. We're already doing it because we already understood that's what we needed to get people to stay here. So to answer the question, it wasn't like I just went one day to the JDA and said, like, I need $13,000 for an assistant. I proved my case by putting the programs out there. And then just as I'm a contract employee, so I was able to see the need and say, like, hey, you needed someone in tourism. I can do the tourism thing and I did say this, I will do the tourism thing if you recognize arts as tourism and economic development. If you let me do my job as a tourism director and put arts and events as my title, then I will do the work for you, and I will make this happen, and I will make you see that arts and events are tourism and economic development. And then a couple years later, having that conversation, going back to the boards, they're seeing that as valuable. Because of course we're creating events and we're creating reasons for people to come from out of town, because we're kind of like centrally located to other little communities. They're coming from bigger towns to access our programming and events. And because we're there as tourism, events, and arts, we're also helping the chamber with their events, and we're also helping 4-H with their fair, that sort of thing. So they see us as useful. But I did then, because we've been so busy and I have my annual meeting, then I get to kind of go down the list of impact. And I think I would just say, keep your numbers, right? So I don't have the greatest tracking system. Well, I track every single person that takes a class through Eventbrite, and every single person that donates through my own weird way of tracking in Excel, like we all do. But if you can keep track of every number of people that are impacted by your programs and your events, that makes a big case for people on these boards. They don't really care as much, and I will do it anyway, but about the fluffiness, and I say fluffiness, it's not really, but they think it is, you know, the whole program, story of the whole program. They want to know how many people came in from out of town this year, how many youth did you impact this year, how many events did you, how much numbers, how many donors, like every single number that you can think of that would make the case for an economic impact is what you have to bring to the table year after year, and that's where you make the case for funding and integration. And I think every single one of you, especially now, I think we're poised in my community, but after the pandemic, to really make the case for arts and culture and to invest from like the city or the county or whatever boards you can, or the chamber or whatever you're working with, to invest in these programs now more than ever, because it's like, what do we need? We need community, and everyone is calling me now because North Dakota is pretty open now. Our cases of COVID are down. What am I doing? Well, I'm fielding calls to get arts at a Mackenzie Electric REC rural electric annual meeting. They want arts programming at their annual meeting. What? That's not what I thought we would be doing, but we were going to do it for them. But everyone is wanting these things that bring community together, especially now after we're waking up after the pandemic. So keep your numbers and keep engaged in the conversation. Go to those meetings. Don't show up one day to just ask for money. You all know this, but I'll just say it, like, I've been involved with that community of volunteers and leaders and community leaders because I show up to those meetings, not just when I'm asking for money, but when I'm trying to learn what's going on, and then have those conversations on the street or in, the Senex or whatever with the people that you see about what's going on. So you understand where their mission lies, because you might be way off base, or maybe you can integrate your idea with their idea of community development. I hope that helped. Right. But, we're so new. So we were able to be there at the beginning and start from scratch. If you're an organization that's been there, they'll ask a lot more questions about what you've been up to, of course, but you also have a really great case of impact. So
yeah, I think that is an awesome piece of advice. And I think you're spot on, especially out of the pandemic, and the American Rescue Plan is, I know on our past conversation, I asked people to raise your hand if you're getting local, county, state funding. And then I asked, is anyone getting federal funding, right? And the American Rescue Plan is one of our history's largest injection really of relief funding that, when you look at it, there's money going to school districts, to counties, and a lot also that is poised to be able to go to rural. But I think that there is definitely a lot of work locally that needs to be done to say, what does this kind of very high level injection of investment look like? But what is the case for, what is the role of arts and culture when we're looking at, an investment in Main Street development, right? How are we drawing those connections and seeing where, what we do in our organizations, and especially what you all do, what is the case for community and economic development and this post-COVID recovery that arts and culture plays a vital role in? And so Jessie, really grateful for you to talk about how exactly are you measuring that impact? Because in many ways, it is a different type of language that we bounce between as we kind of expand also what is the role that these organizations need to play as a kind of instrument of the community. So thank you for that. And I think that's a really good segue to you, Stacy, because I on our planning call, all of us were very also in awe of hearing a little bit of how your local government through their tax structure is also making a long-term investment into the role of arts and culture too. So curious if you can talk about that, how that came to be, how you then need to measure impact, and what impact that level of funding locally also is able to have on your organization.
Absolutely. There are several arts organizations in the community that receive money from what we call the promotion funds for Aberdeen. And I'm guessing probably 15 years ago, the city, and it has to be a law that's put in and approved, or an ordinance or something like that. And it's a triple B tax. So it's a tax on bed, booze, and board. And then the reason, and those funds are kept separate, and they can only be used, or it is to be used on things that promotes Aberdeen. So, it helped, some of it helps with building, like the new Y and the Boys and Girls Club, because obviously those are needed things that help promote Aberdeen and help get people to come here. But it's also to help with events and things, or organizations that are doing things to help bring people to Aberdeen. And so we receive money from that. Our Aberdeen Community Theater receives money from that. The Downtown Association, which they in turn are doing some arts and cultural activities. The CVB, of course, gets quite a bit of it. So that's what it's used for. But to piggyback on what Jessie said, yes, they want to know how it's been used and what kind of impact that's having. So evaluation and numbers and numbers and numbers are huge for that. And then we also have another opportunity for some funding, and that comes from our Hotel Alliance, which is the hotel rooms. I believe it's a $2 per night tax that they add onto your room. And it's very common in cities. You'll see it's worded differently in every place, but you'll see something. And that money is a separate fund again, and you have to make an ask for it. And that is again for events that are coming to Aberdeen, but to promote hotel stays. So they want events that are going to, bring people in overnight, stay in the hotels. And so again, at events, we are tracking where people are coming from. Did they spend the night? Did they go to the, what hotel? And then, so like new this year for Arts in the Park, we're going to use a QR code and have signs up that people can sign, scan the code, and then complete a real short survey for us, and help us collect that information rather than sign in the board that, oh, where are you from, which it works, but it's not the most effective. And so again, they want to see those results. So you get the money, but then you have to prove that you used it like it was to be used.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I'm getting some questions also, just looking at the Q&A. And by the way, I know this is always so tough to do these sort of, conference or webinars when it feels like we're on different virtual planes, but we are on the same virtual space. So keep those questions coming. And I think this string of conversation has sparked some questions around federal funding. And one that is more so a comment that I'm excited to share out. It's from Susanna Sandoval. I'm sorry if I'm not getting that name right, but considering the use of AmeriCorps funding as a way to increase capacity among your organizations to be able to, I think, John, to your point of having young people engaged in service. AmeriCorps is not just for young people, but having, a service year and thinking of arts as a way to deliver, this community service. So curious if anyone has explored that at all. I will say that has a soft spot in my heart. Our organization works closely with the state service commissions and National AmeriCorps as well. We are a recipient of AmeriCorps funds, and that's how we fund our fellows that are coming back home to bring that extra capacity to whether it's local government, community-based nonprofits, that sort of thing. So it's a model that I'm familiar. Curious if anyone here wants to just raise their hand if you've explored or thought about that or known that was available to you. Great. Well, so thank you, Susanna, for your comment. A question that comes with that from Walter, is about, on this piece of accessing federal or state funding, either through forgivable loans to support your work. Is there anything that a philanthropic organization can be doing to help, access some potentially more continued funding for the long term for you all? So I'll pose that question and then also kind of just open it up broadly too, of saying what has been the role of philanthropy for you? What would you like it to be? So Kayla, I'll go to you first in terms of, again, the question is the role of philanthropy for your organization, either to help you access these longer funds or what it has meant for you now.
Well, we were fortunate to receive both rounds of PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, as well as approval for the EIDL loan. And we are in a holding pattern right now with the small venue operators grants. That system crashed repeatedly when it was launched by the Small Business Administration, but it is since up and running. And I think applications are now being processed and decisions should be made in the next month or so based upon priority given to amount of revenue lost over the last year. So we have been lucky to receive funds from the federal government through those sources, as well as we had a county fund, the Mahoning Valley Small Business Association, that distributed county funding this fall. But the government funds, for the most part, the focus has been on payroll, utilities, occupancy costs. What we really need is general operating funds. And some of those have been Gen Op too, but it just, discretion from local foundations to use these funds to bounce back as best you can, just like Arts Midwest has been, to use it as you know best what your organization needs to recover. So those are the best kinds of funds that are out there, and we look forward to applying for those opportunities when they become available. And I think they will be in the near future, aside from just, emergency funds, but now it's about recovering.
Absolutely. Yeah, Aileen, over to you.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that and ask that the application process continue to be very simple and easy, especially for the smaller organizations. All of these organizations on here are based in rural areas of the country, but with varying budget ranges. Our organization happens to be at the very almost the bottom range of budget, between 50 and 60,000. So our resources are very limited. We don't have any paid budget. We weren't eligible for PPP loans because our employees are 1099 employees that we contract out. And so there was a limit to the amount of resources that we were able to apply for when Arts Midwest came around and had their application process be very simple and eligible for an organization such as ours that often gets overlooked. It was a dream come true. So if there was more opportunities like that, where the little guy is being noticed and the application process is simple, and like Kayla said, leaving the discretion up to the organization to how to use those funds for the programming that is most important to them. Absolutely, we would welcome those opportunities. And I know there's a lot of other organizations just like us out there.
Yeah, John.
Yes, I'd like to kind of mimic what others have said here, but our small organization was ineligible for the PPP funds until the tribe actually opened up to nonprofits and small businesses with some of the funds that the nation received. And so we were able to get a very small amount of our PPP needs because we did not fit the criteria for employees, because we too use a contractual agreement for payment of staff and they're not employees. We're not paying benefits. But it is for the support from Midwest that actually really got us through the last 2 to 3 months after the pandemic, before we could even begin planning our next event where we could start generating resources again. So we've been very thankful for that, and we're looking forward to getting our report in to show them how successful we have been since we have received that infusion of resources. We also depend upon, there is the Administration for Native Americans, which is a large federal granting opportunity. The unfortunate part about that is we're competing against tribal nations, and we're a very small art organization attempting to generate resources, and it's like a 3-pound package of paper you have to complete to get that particular application in. They're very helpful, but it's long, very time consuming. If you don't have staff that you can do this with and using the voluntary board, very, very difficult to implement and get through that process. We're in our 3rd attempt this year, and I think after this year, if we're not successful this year, we're probably going to have to throw that one out. We spend way too much time doing that. And then the other big thing, though, is Arts Midwest has been great. We have another organization, a foundation back east called Novo. Novo has provided money specifically for management and has offered us opportunities to, we got a 3-year grant from them, which was excellent that's how we're succeeded and how we are today, because we're able to pick up 4 part-time employees with those funds. So that's another major contributor for us.
Yeah. I'm hearing, these the ability to have an opportunity for 3-year grant, like long-term funding as being core here, simple application processes, also metrics of like impact that in many ways can be seen as like, what is the organization's impact each time? And it sounds like everyone here is collecting that sort of data, right? But what I at least, again, editorializing a bit here is that it seems like so many times philanthropic organizations have, this larger mission, yes, of improving the community, but has a very specific lane. So then all their grant applications are asking you for a whole other set of metrics to also be evaluating for, which requires more general operating support to be able to create those structures, but there's never really that funding to make sure you're reporting on what you need to be. So I guess, Kayla, to lift up what you're saying of, can we be a little bit more expansive of understanding of what funds can be used for, and creative in what types of metrics you're using to evaluate impact. I think crucial to this piece too, because I understand we're seeing federal funding as being, how would we access that? I'll say, from my experience working with, we are in over 100 communities, most of which are rural, especially so I'm from Minnesota, I lead our Minnesota efforts. Almost all of our placements are rural. AmeriCorps funding, right, is an example of federal funds coming through, but where we have been able to be a helpful player for local organizations is that we take on all that administrative reporting, filling out the logic model, actually having a budget and an auditing structure that allows us to be legible for federal funds that I could imagine an organization here has a $50,000, $60,000 operating budget does not have the time to be making sure that, each AmeriCorps member even has the timesheets, right? So I think ways that we are thinking of poising ourselves in this federal landscape piece of how do we get federal resources to rural places is the importance of having this intermediary that is trusted with local partners. So I'm curious if you can I've noticed that in Minnesota, we have some of those, we have like regional foundations that serve as both a philanthropic arm, but also really as kind of a higher level community development driver. And they're able to build the relationships, have enough of the administrative overhead to receive and distribute that type of federal funding as needed regionally. But I'm curious, either Stacy or Jessie, it sounds like both of you are also involved in some of that local government or regional government piece as well. Have you seen, examples of organizations, so philanthropy or a development commission that has stepped up to kind of be the intermediary between federal to local? Or federal to your organization? Yeah, Jessie.
And Stacy might have more to add to this, but what has been useful for us is our state arts organization. And I think that's maybe what you're asking, in terms of focusing on specific arts fundraising. So North Dakota Council on the Arts, of course, lobbies for money for the arts like other state organizations do, and then kind of is the holding tank for opportunities. And they really, really know, they do a great job in knowing who are the arts organizations out there and what their missions are and what they're doing and where they are and what their challenges are. So we work really closely with them. And then there's a North Dakota Community Foundation. Now this isn't federal funds, but they also can be, they have been helpful to us because before we were a nonprofit, you know, we still needed to raise funds, because what do you need to get a grant? You need matching funds, right? And if you're a new organization, you don't have any matching funds and you can't get any funds because you're not a nonprofit. So it's sort of hard to start. So we started with the North Dakota Community Foundation, which is also, there's also a county branch for us, and they will serve as your nonprofit or your fiscal agent, so you can get your feet on the ground, so you can fundraise through them. Those are two really nice resources for us, but I'm a little bit scared of federal funding because of the big packets and the time that I don't have, and I don't have the staff. Like, yes, I could ask my assistant to work on a grant, but she doesn't have the training. You know, there's not a lot of grant writers with experience in McKenzie County. Yeah. So I try to get more, and I think it might be more of a mentality of Western North Dakota. Like, we just try to do it ourselves before we would try to tap into federal money. But the thing is, it's really hard to get funds for employees through grants. So that's where we look, and I said this already, but that's where we look to our local government to really support those things in our local organizations. So that's kind of, but we're really in with what North Dakota Council on the Arts is doing, and they're really been helpful to us making those connections.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. Stacy, anything to add to that? And then we'll go into some closing statements.
I would echo our State Arts Council, same thing, very good about getting information out to us and, funding opportunities. And, they keep their application process very simple also, because they know most of the organizations in South Dakota is a rural state. Most of them are volunteers. Very few have paid staff. So they keep that in mind. And then we also have an organization, an advocacy statewide organization called Arts South Dakota, and they have been amazing through the pandemic and totally did the pivot to advocacy and keeping us aware of what resources are out there for COVID and COVID relief packages and things like that. And like just this week, they sent out an email with the upcoming funds that all of the cities are going to be receiving in this, package that's just coming, with how much our city is going to get, suggestions for how to, get in there and talk to the city council right away so that we're not left out. And, an ideal way was to all of us approach them together rather than each individual organization, do a unified, hey, don't forget to include the arts in this because we need to be included in the recovery package as well. And so those are the two organizations that, we rely on a lot.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm hearing this piece of, because I am seeing in the questions that I would assume that we have some kind of either regional funders or development organizations here of it seems like there's an ask up to each level of what is the coordination that's necessary that, a large federal investment can actually trickle down and not trickle down at like half force, but keep its full force of what it can be because of the level of coordination that is happening, between local orgs like yourselves, these intermediaries and federally. And I know Arts Midwest is really trying to be that solid intermediary partner, which I think puts extra, emphasis really on an intermediary that has these rich local relationships, that has the trust of the local partners, that you're not going to the same, group of 5, 10, 15, but really, expanding who's in that portfolio, but also putting pressure both on multiple levels to say, what are innovative, expansive ways that we can be thinking of the role of arts and culture in so many lanes of what our communities need. Thanks for letting me editorialize on that, but I think, the things each of you are giving voice to is speaking so powerfully to what does it look like if we had a magic wand to sustain the work that we all do. In these last moments of our time together, we'd love to do a rapid fire, about a minute each between each person, to say, how do you sustain you? I think a very important feature of being an arts organization or any, local organization in a rural area is that, I'm on Rotary, I'm on the Area Foundation board, I'm on a community real estate investment fund, I'm doing a table at the Lake Fest for 4th of July. You come back home, or you come to your rural community as an arts leader, and you're also a leader in everything else. How are you keeping afloat? How are you finding the things that sustain you? And how are you keeping you going so that you can do this work? So we'll do a rapid fire all around. Jess, we ended with you in the first bit, so I'll go to you first. What sustains you?
I need everybody to tell me what they're doing, because I'm going through a little bit of that, like a reevaluation of where my time is being spent right now as we speak, because I have kids and I have a ranch and I have another music business. And because I came home 10 years ago and helped build some of these things in a time of need, then I wind up being the go-to person. And so I need to learn how to say no to some things and delegate. So I'm learning how to delegate. I'm learning how to ask for help. And just because you don't get help if you don't ask for it, and you burn yourself out if you think you can do it all yourself. So just keeping in mind, I want this Arts Foundation to go beyond me. And so everything that I do, I think, I don't want to do it myself. What does it look like if I'm not doing it myself? So that's kind of in the back of my mind. But then just personally, trying really hard to make and pencil in that time, those vacations, those things that you need to do with your family. And but asking for help is a big one. And that's a hard one, I think, for a lot of leaders. So I'm learning it, and I really want to hear what everyone else is doing, because maybe I'll write it down, because I need a little boost right now.
Yeah, Stacy, we'll look to you for the boost. How do you sustain you?
Well, first, it was hard, but I've learned to say no. You don't have to say yes to every question or every request that is made of you. And that was hard for me, but over the last years or several years, it's no, it's okay, because your first responsibility is your organization that you're with. And yes, it's great to build those relationships on, Rotary and Chamber and CVB and all of those. But if you fail at your own organization while you're trying to do that, that's not good either. So that was the first thing. And then also, you just have to learn to also, for me, to clock out and go home and leave your work in the office. You don't have to check your phone, email all the time at night, or, do that. So just really learn to separate and walk away, which you just have to do it in that way. Personally, when it's nice out, my husband and I get on our motorcycle, and there's nothing better than that, to just enjoy the open air in South Dakota and the beautiful scenery. And when it's not COVID and I get to travel, I'm the happiest when I can have my feet in the beachy sand.
Great. Well, I'll see you in Sturgis. Aileen, what sustains you?
Yeah, the pandemic really brought light to what is most important in all of our lives, right? I would say with the organizations that I support, really just focusing in on what is the mission of the organization you're supporting. And are the things that you're choosing to do on a daily basis supporting that mission? And if they're not, then yes, that's when you say no. No, I'm not going to tackle this today. If I have time later, I will tackle it. Personally, really focusing on what is a priority in your own life. Recognizing that there was so much loss occurring, personal loss, community loss, financial loss. What would your world look like if you did lose everything? What would be the most important things? And it always came down to the same thing, which was, faith, family, children, if you have children, and then of course your community, the people that are closest to you. Just prioritizing those things that feed you and give you energy of your mind and your spirit and your soul.
Thank you. John, what sustains you?
Really pushing to maintain a balance in all aspects of my life. Everything I do and get engaged in, you got to keep a balance. And you need to balance your mental, physical, spiritual components of yourself. And I hear everybody here say, don't volunteer. My word is don't retire. Because once you retire, you tend to get asked to be involved and do more and more and more. And I do that now. I'm burning the candle at every end, but I enjoy it. And it's also keeping me alive because I'm not sitting in my recliner. I'm working. But just to answer just what was just said, family, community, faith, succession planning. I'm a professional planner. Succession planning is really important. And then putting the responsibility on the board to jump up and through committee work, do their work, get our jobs and our vision and our mission completed by spreading the wealth of opportunity for everybody to participate.
Thank you. And last but not least, Kayla, what sustains you?
Well, I love hearing how everyone has trying to manage their own versions of self-sustaining. Speaking for myself, this year was very challenging. We were operating from a place of somewhat desperation. As soon as a grant would come up, you have to apply for it, and it was go after the money, and wonderful to have the amount of opportunities we did, but it was a constant rat race of just not panicking, but you had to do it. There was no way to say no because the survival of the company depended on your ability to get those funds. So now that we are seeing the light at the end of this tunnel, it has been less of a moment of action and more now of reflection and being able to really step back and focus on self-sustaining. So I have to say my go-tos are nature, family, friends, and also performing too. I'm an artist myself, so I'm very excited for the day where we can be back on stage and having our communities in a space again together to fill that need. So I'm now coming out of this and I'm feeling much more grounded than we had been.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much for the invaluable work that you do for your communities, for your organizations, and really for our entire region and country. It is such an honor to be in conversation with you all. And thank you, attendees, for listening in and for sharing this virtual space with us. We can feel your virtual energy even in the wild worlds of Zoom. So thank you and have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day.
And this is Christy from Arts Midwest, and I would like to end it to ask Benya, what are you doing to sustain yourself as well?
Oh, darn, this was not on the agenda. I was tearing up a bit hearing people say family, faith, friends, and community. I think that is, I'd probably for myself put faith in the first piece, as I think so much flows from that of how do we keep loving through loss, loving through pain, and finding hope. And a lot of that comes from my faith and making sure that I can spend time to make sure that that is nurtured so that my family, friends, work, all of that, my community can be nurtured from that. So Thanks for the pop quiz question.
Thank you to all of you. We are so honored to be able to spotlight all of you and the great work that you're doing in your communities, and are so grateful for you coming together with us today and spending this time. And I hope you can find a moment of breath after we are done here today. And I truly just thank you on behalf of Arts Midwest, and thank you for being part of the Gather Round series. And we are going to end it soon. I just want to, as a reminder, just let everyone know we are continuing this work on June 10th with our final exploration on anti-racism in a rural setting with the Stewart's Opera House and their community of partners in Southeast Appalachia, Ohio. So we're really excited for that conversation coming up, and we invite you all. And thank you everyone who participated today, and we'll be back in touch with the recording following the session. Thank you. Have a good day.